Joy, why not?
Absolutely.
Should we kick off?
Yeah, let's kick off. James, thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Do you want to introduce yourself and sort of give everybody that's listening and watching a bit of an overview as to who you are and what you do?
Wow. Okay. Well, that could possibly take up the whole podcast, but anyway. My name's James Bardwell. I have a small farm. I live just outside Weston-super-Mare. I worked as an animal feed merchant for 30 odd years in this area. And then I sort of retired, and I've never worked harder in my life. My wife and I have 2 children, where we have 3 grandchildren, and the 3 grandchildren live about 6 feet away from us. So we see an awful lot of them, which is lovely. But we can send them home.
Yeah. Woohoo!
Just shuffle them out the door and go, there you go.
Absolutely.
So did you have the farm before you actually?
No, the story about the farm is we actually lived in Cleve, Bay and I, with our 2 children.
Yeah.
And Bay's parents had a small holding just the other side of Bridgewater.
Yeah.
And they were quite elderly and not terribly fit. And I think I can tell this story perfectly well. But Bay had a phone call from her mother to say, help, I've got 2 people coming for lunch that I wasn't expecting. So Bay had to get in the car, drive to Bridgewater, put a lettuce leaf and a slice of ham on 4 plates and come home again. And on her arrival home, she said, we can't stick this. This is going to only get worse.
Yeah.
She's an only child, and we decided to see if we could find somewhere that would suit all of us. And we looked at all sorts of different places, bearing in mind that Bay's mum and dad had always farmed one way or another.
Yeah.
Bay was she was in the first female intake at Shuttleworth Agricultural College, where she got her HND in agriculture.
Where's Shuttleworth?
Shuttleworth, Bedfordshire.
Right, okay.
About the most inconvenient place to get to from down here, but there we go. And I had been brought up on a farm, and I'd always had farming in my blood, even though I was selling out animal feed to farmers. So when we found where we are, we were looking for a house big enough to divide, which that was the key bit. And it was through a friend actually at market at Winford who said, I think that this gentleman might be selling. So after about a fortnight, I was introduced to the gentleman. And to cut a long story short, he really didn't want to put it on the open market.
Yeah.
So eventually I was invited into the kitchen.
Very, very privileged.
Absolutely. Yeah. He was a widower with a housekeeper. And I got as far as the kitchen. And I mean, the house looked as though it was okay, but you can't really just tell from a kitchen. And the second time I got downstairs, and the third time I was invited upstairs. I then had to go home and draw it out in a plan.
Oh,
so
gosh.
that get some, and it is the most difficult house to do that to, because it's got sort of rooms that are half over another room. It's not
It's higgledy-piggledy.
And it's long, and it's got a bit sticky out at the back. It's a bit complicated. Anyway, in the end, he didn't put it on the market, and we bought it with its 45 acres in 1988.
Wow. It's quite a while ago, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, we've been there, knocking on the door of 40 years, 36 years. And we divided the house. Bay's parents sadly died in the sort of early parts of the 2000s. And so then we had a house full for a bit. And then we had a barn conversion for Tom and Sophie. And my daughter bought a cottage that we'd sold away back again. And now it's the 2 of us. But it's actually quite nice. We've got plenty of space.
Brilliant.
Oh, that sounds really lovely.
Quite interesting. A couple of things that you said there that kind of sparked my brain thinking, which was about Winford Market and the fact that the farming community do an awful lot of their business at the markets. It's not necessarily anything to do with selling cows and sheep and...
Absolutely. I mean, it was a great sadness. Winford really went at the end of the foot and mouth crisis at the beginning of the 2000s. And I mean, in my very early days, which I started working in 1982 for the feed company, I had a customer he farmed about 3 miles away from Winford, who would come in and do every single scrap of his business at market because he didn't have a telephone. Yeah. And so that was his only contact all week. That was his business contact. If you weren't at market, or if any business wasn't at market, he didn't know who they were, so they never got any of his business. It was, and trying to deal with, I mean, they were easier to deal with them, but the utilities, he had to go to the post office and put it across the counter and so on and so forth. But then the bank appeared at market every week.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. They
So
obviously
they had a branch. You could go and cash checks, pay money in. Can I tell you a story about the bank?
Of course you can, yeah.
Well, after we bought the farm, if you have any recollection of interest rates, 1988 was about the worst time to borrow any significant sum of money. But that was fine. We did that with our man from Winford. And shortly afterwards, we realised that our cash flow projections had flown straight out the window. A few sheep, a few pigs, and a few cattle were never going to keep us there. So another colleague in the feed business said, I know what you need to do. You need to keep free-range hens. Well, we had some friends who kept free-range hens, so we did a bit of investigation, and we started on the road to go from 5,000. We finished up with 16,000 free-range laying hens. The first bit was I had to go and borrow a bit more money. So I toddled into Chumagna, into the NatWest Bank, and in those days you knew everybody. Yeah. And I said, morning, any chance of having a word with Eric? No, terribly sorry. Eric's off sick. I said, oh dear, what's his problem? He's got salmonella poisoning. That was in the middle of Edwina Curry and all the scares about eggs and, the bottom falling out of the egg market and so on and so forth. I said, oh my God, what gave him that? And they said a prawn sandwich. So
thank goodness.
I was greatly relieved, and in the end, he lent me the money, so all was good. But yeah, that was a sort of tricky moment.
It is funny though, isn't it? How in small communities, it's not quite the same now as it was before, where we could go to the bank, we knew the bank manager, we could sit there and have a chat with them, have a cup of tea, and arrange our lives really through things like that. Whereas you just can't do that.
No, you can't. No.
Me and my dad went into the NatWest branch in Weston-super-Mare literally last week, and he wanted to open an additional bank account, so he could move some money around. And we went into there. We queued in for the counter, got to the counter, and explained what he wanted to do. Oh, you can't do that here. No. You can't open a bank account in a bank.
It's crazy.
It was mental, absolutely mental. So you can make an appointment, but all they're going to do is show you how to do it online. And you just think, this is mental. No wonder banks are closing all the branches. They don't do anything in the branches.
No.
I must admit, because we've been dealing with Dave's dad's and Dave's brother sadly passed away at Christmas. And we've been dealing with all their financial affairs. His dad's still alive, but we're dealing with it all. And the best place that we found was the Nationwide, because we went in there and said, this is a circumstance. There's no appointment. We went up to Bristol. We were up there anyway, went into Bristol, took all the paperwork, said, these are the circumstances. Can you help? Yep, sit down. I'll deal with it all there and there. Absolutely out of this world.
We had the same experience at Lloyd's Bank. But yeah, NatWest were awful.
I mean, sadly, banks, from my experience, and I've had one or two experiences like that, they're great when you've been bereaved, but when you're still alive and you want to continue banking, they're hopeless.
Yeah, TSB were pretty rubbish.
Not
Dave's alive dad.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really sad that you've got to die to actually get a good service.
Yes. Yeah. You don't even realise you've had it, do you?
I suppose it helps the families in one sense.
That's very true. So tell us more about your sort of the early days of the free range hen farming.
Well, I mean, I was working full time. So Bay, let's explain. My wife is Bay. That's B-A-Y, like the Bay of Biscay or any other sort of bay that you like to know. It is her real name, and it's what she was christened. So people say, well, they ask all those questions, and those are the answers to the questions that you haven't asked. So yeah, she would be at home with two small children and mother and father-in-law in the other half of the house. And she would do the day-to-day stuff. I would get up at about 4 or 5 o'clock every morning, go and do an early run of eggs, open nest boxes, which we used to have to do every morning. Then I come in, I stank, so I have to go and have a shower, and then I have a bit of breakfast and get to work by 8:30. We then had some help during the day. I mean, in the end, when we had 16,000, we had a reasonable amount of help, but we were picking up 1 million eggs a year.
Wow.
And that, we had a brief interlude when we had an automatic egg collecting system, but unfortunately it wasn't installed right. So we hated it and it didn't work properly. So we took it out. But they were actually picked up by hand. So you went into the behind the hens nest box, the eggs rolled away into a wire basket, and you just pick them all up and put them into egg trays. So that was quite fun. And then in the evenings, I'd come back and again start again and clear up and whatever. In actual fact, from my perspective, the worst time was when there weren't any hens, because the hens would go. They last about 14 months from in to out.
Right.
And then you were under serious pressure to clean out and repair and get any repairs done for the next flock. And suddenly there was a real time pressure. And cleaning out was quite hard work. There was a lot of, in the early days, we used to do it all ourselves. So we were lifting heavy slats out because the hens would live about 2-3 feet above ground level, so that the waste could go down through. Take all of those out, dig it out, spread it, do whatever you had to do, pressure wash it clean, get all the bugs and slugs out of it, reassemble the feeding system and the water system and everything else. And it had to be done by the 25th of next month, because that's when they were coming in, and that was absolutely unnegotiable. So that was probably the most stressful part of keeping hens.
Did you sell all 1 million eggs a year?
Oh, yes. We had a contract.
Right,
That's the only way we could have done it. We had a contract with what in those days was called Dean's Farm Eggs. They're now something completely different. But and they'd send a lorry in 2-3 times a week.
Right, okay.
We'd sell quite a few from the door, but the rest would go. And we had a milk check, basically. They were about 10 days behind, but then every, I can't remember now, Tuesday or something, a week's worth of eggs would come into the bank account.
Nice. Yeah.
So it was...
So do you still have chickens?
12, I think.
So you diversified into other things then after that?
Well, the slight issue that we had, I mean, the land around here is quite heavy land. It's heavy clay. Yeah. So going back to cleaning the hen house out, we'd have it absolutely sparkling, and, we'd disinfect it and everything else, and we'd get the new flock of hens in, and we'd have fabulous egg production, perfect eggs, and then inevitably they're free range, so you have to let them outside. Trouble is, if they come in January, which inevitably sometimes they did, when you let them out, what do? They go and drink out of the first nasty, muddy last flock puddle that they can find, pick up all the diseases that the last flock had. And as time went on, we couldn't, for perfectly legitimate reasons, we couldn't dose them with stuff to cure them. And this may sound harsh, but actually the worst chicken to have is a live one that doesn't lay eggs.
Yeah. You
don't feed a dead one. A live one you are feeding, producing eggs, is great, but that middle one can crucify the economics of a flock. Because if you have a really bad set of disease that goes through them, then you could be feeding 1,000 birds that aren't paying anything back towards their feed. So, yes, that was a long, circuitous, roundabout answer to the question, which I haven't even answered yet, have I? But we decided in the early 2000s that there must be a better way to make a living. And they were 2 big steel frame buildings that we had for the hens. So we got planning permission to convert them into industrial units. And they were long. I mean, one was 200 feet long and the other was 160. So we managed to create 9 40-foot square industrial units.
Nice.
And that took about 2.5 years to go from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And we stuck with that. I was working, no hens. Life was quite a lot easier. In the meantime, my son Tom started the contracting business, which was just slightly back to square one because we were suddenly having to invest and so on and so forth, but that was okay. And then in 2012, I finished my work as a feed merchant under, I always say, slightly difficult circumstances. In fact, it was the worst time in my life. It was absolutely horrible. And we had to scratch our heads pretty sharpish to work out how to replace a salary that I was expecting to go on for another 8 or 9 years. So we built another industrial unit, and in 2022 we built 9 more. So we've now got 22 industrial units, and we're just about breathing a sigh of relief, except that I think they always say in a building project have a 10% contingency charge. Well, as a result of COVID and the invasion of Ukraine, our 40% was still under. So I think it was about 60% over budget as the price of steel went up, and concrete and everything else. So, but there we are. They're all done. And I mean, we're very luckily placed. They're all full. We've had the occasional dropout, and I've not lost a month's rent for quite a long time, and I am touching your kitchen table hard.
Yeah. Well, it's hard when you don't get your rentals in. Well, we were all in the same position. We've all got, we've all got properties and various other bits and pieces. And if you lose a tenant of any kind, it hits the margins, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's no backup for you. You can't go along to benefits and say, "Oh, I've got no rentals for this month." It doesn't work.
But I don't know if you find this, but if one gives their notice, you then find 2 others do.
Yes.
It's like a weird monopoly.
Bizarre.
Domino, happens.
Yeah. They almost as though they sort of talk to each other as they give a really nasty shock.
That's it, yeah. You go along nicely for 6 months, then all of a sudden one gives notice, then another, and it's like,
and then you panic.
Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to ask a question, but I do because I'm nosy. So what happened with your job?
Well,
you don't have to say it if you don't want to.
No, I mean, without going into the detail, I mean, I'd been a director for 20 years.
Yeah.
I had to get pretty top lawyers in Bristol involved to deal with me because the company were not being very kind. And when it was all over, my solicitor said, I have never, ever in my 35 years as a solicitor dealing with employment things had to deal with such an unpleasant directorial exit.
Wow.
So that perhaps paints a bit of a picture.
How did it impact on you?
Oh, I had a complete meltdown.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the one thing that saved me, actually, basically saved me, but it was 2012 Summer Olympics. And I sat and I was glued to those all summer, basically. I mean, it basically came to a head about a month after Tom and Sophie, my son and daughter-in-law, got married. Managed to get through that, and I think that was once the adrenaline ran out from that, then I woke up one morning. They had to take me into Western Hospital. But I think it gives you strength in the end. And when I do some work for an organisation called the Farming Community Network, and I joined them pretty much straight away when I finished working. And I don't do vast amounts. We're lucky. We've got a lot of volunteers in Somerset. But I think it gives you some empathy and the ability to talk to people who are, struggling a bit. And I quite enjoy that. I'm sure you guys know that experience is better than any classroom lesson.
Piece of paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've done some bits and pieces where people have recommended us via the network.
Yeah,
as a charity, which has been quite nice.
Mm.
But people see you being successful in the community, but also they see you successful financially and all of that, and it looks good, doesn't it?
It does, but it's interesting, and I wasn't going to look at my phone, but there we go. It was any other day. Okay, this is on Facebook. Okay, and Facebook is a wonderful thing if you treat it wonderfully, and a horrible thing if you don't. I hold in a lot. When I'm in pain, I don't like to worry other people. No matter how hard I cry or how much somebody asks, my answers will be, I'm fine, even if it's not true. And that's sort of hit home.
Yeah.
I think it's true for a lot of us, actually. I'm fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think you're right, and people do it. And I think that's one of the reasons we started this podcast, really, was to share everyday people and what they do and what they go through, because social media makes it look like you're amazing. You always dress amazing. You always look amazing. You have an amazing life. You have a great holidays. You have a great family and friends and so on and so on. But you scratch the surface and like you said from that, you had no idea what's going on in people's lives. And that's why one of the reasons we started this was to just open up a bit more and, go into people's rooms and their living rooms and say, this is what the reality is. There's ups and downs in the world. There's ups and downs in life. And yeah, this is how you kind of move through it.
And actually, we're all dealing with it to at one level or another. You know, it's not just me. It's not just any of us. It's every single one of us has a problem. Any person who says they haven't got a problem in the world is lying.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, a problem to you may not be the same problem that I have, but it doesn't matter.
No.
It's what you are as an individual. And, you know, we've experienced our own in our own way. And I, you know, it's difficult. Oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. You're going to have to take it.
We can come back to that.
Yeah.
We can come back to that. But yeah, you know, everyone, you just don't know what people are going through. And you know, I've forgotten what the saying is, but there is a saying around, you know, the people who look like they're doing the best are probably doing the worst. There's better words than that, but that's kind of what it says. I mean, you've only got to look at people like Robin Williams, the famous actor comedian. You know, he looked like he was doing amazing, and the reality is, you know, sadly he took his own life.
Absolutely.
And you know, it was just a really sad time of life, really.
And it shook everybody rigid.
It did. Yeah,
absolutely shook them rigid.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's life is a curious thing, isn't it? But you know, most of the time, it is great.
Yeah.
You know, we are
absolutely.
We are hugely. I consider myself hugely lucky to have a farm, have a family, do lots of stuff. I do lots of stuff with young farmers. That's another of my little sidelines. I say sidelines, but both Bay and I have been heavily involved for 20 odd years.
But I think those kind of things bring people together, don't they? It's that which we need in the community. It's like hunting, fishing, shooting. It's all the same, isn't it? It brings the local countryside together.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you might not see anybody from one week to the next. Like you said, it's like going to the farm, to the markets. You might not see anybody from one week to the next.
No.
But actually, sometimes just meeting somebody at a hunt meet, or meeting somebody out fishing, or meeting somebody out shooting, or something like that. That's what we do in the countryside.
Yeah. It is very much so. And I think, in the tail end days of my time selling animal feed, you know, in 1988, you'd go down the drive and the farmer said, "Oh, not another one." You know, the sign that said every third sales rep gets shot and the second one's just left was never very welcoming. But towards the end, there weren't very many of us left, and actually you were welcomed with open arms.
Wow.
Just for a chat. And that was the difference in 25, 30 years.
But I think that wider community bit, I mean, we all know that suicide rates are very high in the farming community and in the countryside really as a whole. And, you know, if we really take that into consideration, it's not just the farmer that sits on his own in his cottage, because some of them are really happy what they're doing.
Absolutely.
But it's the person like yourself, if you see what I'm saying, that has been very successful to the outside world, look very successful, but actually it's that internal challenge, and it's not necessarily of your own doing. It can be of somebody else's doing, or circumstances that you found yourself in.
Yeah, and you can also, if you've been in business long enough, I defy anybody to have made all correct decisions. So sometimes you make a wrong decision.
Absolutely.
And that can be quite draining. You know, however, you know, and then suddenly you start paddling like stink to make the whole thing stable again.
Yeah.
You know, your boat starts rocking.
And of course, it's very hard to share things like that because, you know, especially if you are in business, you know, you don't want your customers knowing that your ship's going down. No. So you've got to have the best poker face on and look like you're doing amazing, even though, like you said, under the water, you are paddling like.
How are you? I'm fine.
Well, I've just been out riding this morning, and I was having a conversation with somebody, and they've got their own circumstances going on, and we ride together every week, twice a week. And she was saying, and you know, like, my circumstances haven't been easy recently, and you know, she said, I don't know how you do it. How do you get out of bed in the morning sometimes? She said, because what you've been through is awful. And I said, I agree with you, but you have to make a choice. You have to make that choice. To the world, I look fine, but inside I'm not.
Absolutely.
But I have to make that choice. I have to decide whether I'm going to look. Am I going to get out of bed in the morning? Am I going to look fine to the world or not? And I think that's the thing. Fine for some people is just actually getting out of bed in the morning. Fine for other people are functioning and getting out of bed in the morning. I think everybody's fine is different, isn't it?
I think so. And I mean, I always look back on my difficult period as being in some respects, I was quite lucky because it was basically that real sort of breakdown time was a single issue.
Yeah.
So it lasted for about a year. But once I had resolved that issue, I could then start the road to recovery.
Of course.
And there were difficult but exciting times, which then got me on my feet again. Interestingly, we came out of Bristol, we'd signed all the documents. There was a super little sort of cafe place underneath the flyovers in the Cumberland Basin. Can't remember what it was called now. Anyway, we stopped in there and had some lunch. And I went, I know where I stand. I've got some money coming in. Now we can go forward.
Yeah.
That precipitated Bay going downhill because she'd supported me for that year. And then suddenly she fell off the precipice. And we then had to get her back on the straight and narrow again because supporting somebody who's going through a crisis is blooming hard work. And that actually doesn't matter whether it's a spouse or a friend. We get lots of, I'm afraid our kitchen is a bit of a through way for all sorts of people. And we get the occasional young farmer will come through going through a crisis and you help them and you talk to them and you do whatever you can. But even then, when you've got, other than friendship, nothing else involved, when they eventually go and you think that they feel better than they did when they arrived, you still go, that was quite hard work, actually.
Yeah.
That was quite mentally tiring. And that's fine. It's not your problem, so you can walk away from it.
But you don't.
But you don't, do you?
Because it's still there in the back of your mind. You're still thinking about that young man or that young lady or that family or whatever the circumstance, so it doesn't go away.
Yeah. No, I had a phone call from a young farmer, and she was in a bit of a crisis. She wanted to come over. She couldn't because it just wasn't going to work. Quite a long conversation. I thought she was okay. Just checking in the following day. Just to send her a text. How you doing? Yes, fine. After I spoke to you, thank you very much. On we went. But you have to keep checking. You have to keep checking.
Yeah. And it's, there's so many great people out there that do that. There's also lots of people who sadly are a little bit self-centered and they're just not very good with that.
Is it self-centered, or is it that actually they don't feel able to manage that? And I think sometimes it can be that as well.
I think it probably can be that sometimes.
People don't know what to say or how to support somebody, or indeed it scares them.
Possibly.
And you don't know what's going on for that person, do you?
You don't, but I still think, a text to say, hope you're doing okay, or, if you fancy a coffee, I'm here type thing. It's very easy for people to do.
See, some people have very, very small circles of life, particularly after they're retired. But, either small family, no family, not many hobbies. I without going into the names and anything else, but I can think of one or two people, and they just don't do anything. And they don't get involved in their community, so they don't know people. But then that's desperately sad when they've got problems because there's nobody there to help them.
Yeah. That was exactly the point I was going to make. Is unfortunately that is what happens. There are people out there who, for whatever reason, don't support their community or their friends very well, and then they don't know what to do or even how to ask for help when it's the
interestingly
the
though,
around.
Mike, you say support their community. I'm not sure that's necessarily a fair word. I think they don't know how to get involved in it.
Yeah, possibly.
It's not an abandonment. It's just
How to.
Some people like an insular life.
Yes,
and some people don't. And I mean, I don't think any of us in this room do. I think we're all heavily involved in all sorts of things. And that's absolutely brilliant. That's why we're here. But I can think of lots of people who wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah.
But saying
True.
that, I still feel that bit where when you're I'm a very independent person.
I can sort of tell.
Yeah. And so therefore, I don't go to people to ask for help. If I ask you to help me, it's a very rare occasion. And I think there is almost that they
Possibly.
don't. I do lots for lots of people, but actually saying to somebody, can you, is a really hard.
And that's where, and it happened not very long ago, I phoned a very close friend, couple, the couple have been friends of us for a long, long time. And I happened to phone on what transpired to be a really, really difficult day. And I thought, blimey, this is tough, isn't it? And I put down the phone. We dealt with what we had to deal with. And I thought, now what do I do? And in the end, I just got in the car and drove over. They weren't very far away. They didn't ask me to. And and it was, I discussed it with Bear and I said, should I? And she said, well, they're not going to tell you to go away, are they? And that sometimes, I know it's a slightly morbid thing, but the farming community always have huge funerals because so many people know so many people. And you say, oh, really? Do you think, should I go to that one? And whoever turned up at a funeral and was told, what are you doing here?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, why have you come? Well, because I knew them. But it's not a conversation that ever happens. People are always grateful for support.
That's
Most
very
people
true.
are.
Absolutely. Changing the subject slightly, I'd love to talk about the Bath and West Society, which is how we met, because you're one of the judges of the Prince of Wales Award, and our charity, Summer House Somerset, was kindly awarded that award last year. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your involvement and how you got involved?
Well, I mean, the Bath and West has been going for 170, 180 years. Someone will tell me how wrong I am, but it's quite a long time. And there are various awards and things which come and go. And the Prince of Wales Award, because we are in the Southwest, and the Prince of Wales is the Duke of Cornwall, and he has a vested interest in the Southwest. There's quite a lot of duchy land in Somerset. And so basically the duchy kindly give the cash prize, the Bath and West give a trophy. And I became involved when a gentleman who had been doing it for quite a lot of years decided at nearly 90 that he probably had enough. And he's still, I mean, he's the most extraordinary man. He's only about 5'3". And I did say when I took over, I've never known a short man with such big shoes to fill. And so they have been. But how I got involved, I think it always is not what you know, it's who you know. And I had a phone call from somebody one day. They said, are your ears burning? And I said, not currently. Oh, well, we've been talking about you and we thought you were just the chap. So a few more conversations and the chap got involved. So, yeah, we basically advertise it in the beginning of the year. We have written applications which go out to the community. It's basically a competition where you're trying to encourage community involvement in projects that the community does for itself. So, you know, where volunteers do great things for other people in the community. That's the basic thing that we're looking at. What it does do is produce, and we did have it this year, we did have three results that we looked at, or three that we shortlisted, and we would, in the end, if you'll excuse the phrase, we were looking at chalk and cheese. So we had two that were quite similar and one that was so different that it was quite difficult to judge, as Mike well knows. But in the end, this year we reduced 14 down to 3. We then had a day visiting, and bless them, everybody always pushes the boat out for us. They love to see us. The fact that we are privileged enough to hang the name, the Prince of Wales, onto the award gives us a little bit of kudos that we wouldn't have if it was just the Bath and West, I'm sure. And we take it very seriously. So we ask lots of questions. And equally, as Mike knows, we then go and sit in my dining room at home and we sweated for about 2 hours to decide which of the 3 should win.
How many judges are there?
3 or 4. It does depend a little bit. We have one from the Duchy, always one of last year's winner, one representing last year's winner, which is how Mike was involved. I chair the judging and I sort of steward, and I'm the time police to make sure we all get everywhere at the right time. And last year we had another lady from the Bath and West as well, so 4. Whether we'll continue with 4, I'm not quite sure, because in the end, you can have a split vote with 4, whereas if there's an odd number, it's more difficult. But yeah, so that's how we do it. It's a great day. It's you go to places that you wouldn't otherwise go to. I can't see any other method that I would have ever walked through the door of somewhere house or of any of the places. Well, I might have gone to the winner possibly, but that was a pub. But the other two, definitely, there's no way I would have walked through the doors. So it's a great privilege.
In the end,
it was the Hampton Inn, which is what was really interesting. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed judging, so thank you for inviting me, because it was really good fun, all of it, the the shortlisting and the actual day. But what I think transpired, or what transpired for me, is that actually all three shortlisted, they were all community hubs. It was just that one of them was in a different. It was just a different guise, really. You had two different sort of what's the word? Can't think of what the word is now. But essentially, all the communities had different things that they were missing out on, and the All Hampton Inn was the one that won.
Yeah, and I think, I know this is a public podcast, but I think it's what I found quite interesting, and what made the decision quite difficult, is that two of them could potentially be described as disadvantaged.
Yes.
And the other one patently wasn't. But it could have created a disadvantaged community if it hadn't happened. So basically, a pub shut without notice, and the community got a 15-year lease, redid it, revamped it, got it going again. Lots of community involvement, both in the physical work and in the management. Not so much the management, they had a manager, but in running clubs and societies and quizzes and everything else. And it's quite a small village, and it worked. And they did the whole thing in 10 months, I think.
wow.
And it's fair to say that they were disadvantaged, just in a different way. It wasn't about money. It was more about access to things. It was a community that is in the middle of nowhere. They don't have no shops, no village shop, no village hall, nothing like that. They had absolutely nothing, and they created a community hub.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hence my description of would have become disadvantaged if they hadn't done it. And I think that's quite important. I mean, but the other two, which were community hubs, they were doing absolutely fantastic work, which is what made it so difficult. Yeah.
So were you a member of the Bath and West?
No, because I've always been involved in farming, I've been heavily involved in the North Somerset Agricultural Society.
Right, okay.
I've been chairman twice and president of that. So if I say I'm quite well known, that's not trying to blow my own trumpet,
No.
but quite a lot of people know me. And so therefore, I as a result of doing the Prince of Wales Award, I now sit on the Bath and West Charity Committee, and I'm on the Bath and West Council. But that actually happened after I was invited to do the Prince of Wales Award. Some people say I've got a handle stuck to the side of my head and I'm a mug.
It's strange, because I got an award from what is now the Queen, but wasn't then. She was Prince Charles's wife at the time.
Duchess of Cornwall. Yeah.
Whatever she was. I'm not very good at remembering those things. And I was quite shocked, really, that I got it. It was like, oh, okay, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to actually recognise what I've done and in the community. And it was a personal thing. It wasn't given to the organisation. It was given to me personally. And I think it is quite nice to get some recognition for what you do in the community. We do a lot in the community as a charity, but there are other things that we do aside from that people don't even know about. And I think having that recognition for yourself, I think, is important as well.
I think so. And I think it's something that when we start the judging process for the Prince of Wales Award, it's very easy to look at 3 sides of A4 from each applicant.
Yeah.
And then, so inevitably, you have to reduce it to a manageable number that you can visit in a day. And sometimes you arrive and the bunting's out and the cakes have been cooked and the coffee's ready for you, and you've got 15 or 20 people who normally only come 2 at a time to the organisation are all there to meet you. And you realise just how important this whole thing is to them. And sometimes, because I do it every year, I try not to forget, but it's quite easy. You could forget. Oh, here we go, Prince of Wales Award again. Nice day, pottering around. We'll all have lunch and then we'll come back and make a decision. But that certificate, which I didn't mention in terms of the award, but that certificate that you get to hang on the wall, which is personally signed by the Prince of Wales, is really, really important to the people who get it.
Yeah.
It is, and rest assured that the Prince of Wales, not only does he sign it, he has to have a paragraph or two about the winner so that he knows what he's signing and why he's signing it.
But you don't necessarily, I mean, like for us as a charity, it's very difficult to say this is what, and to show somebody around. Did we have a visitor? I can't remember.
Yeah, James came. James
I actually cannot remember. Where was I?
I don't think you were around at that. I think you were on holiday, actually. I think you were on holiday. Yeah. But
but it's very difficult for some people to actually to define what they do in the community because it's very much done in the background. They don't know. I mean, most people didn't even know we existed for years.
No. But also it's, when the judges go out, when we went out, it's a snapshot of about an hour. I think it was less than 50 minutes we were at these places for, because it's such a big area that the award covers. It's all the way down to Cornwall, up to, is it Swindon?
Doesn't quite intuit. It's not Cornwall, but we could go. The worst case scenario was Gloucester to Bournemouth.
Which, to do that in a day and to have sufficient time to meet the people who run these organisations and benefit from these organisations, incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a full day when we went judging, and I drove to Dundee the next day, so it was a lot of driving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We met when we came to visit you. We met a couple of people who you were helping. And
do you know, I have no recollection of it. It was really awful, isn't it?
And that was brave of them, because obviously they're not in the best place in their lives, and that was great. And that's the important bit, really, to be able to. It is really important to see the people who are putting the work in, but it's really useful to see the people who are in receipt of it, if it's possible. It's not always possible.
But I think that's the thing about getting feedback, isn't it, from people, and we see that in the background. You see people will email us and say, thank you so much. And if it wasn't for this, then I wouldn't have got here and I wouldn't have done that. Or my child would have got this. And it's lovely to get that. We just don't dish it out very well in this country as much as we could.
No, I think people aren't very good at saying thank you. Any better. They're not really good at saying thank you any more than they're actually going back to what we said earlier about saying, please, can you help?
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, so true.
So where's your future? What are you going to do?
Oh, quietening down a little bit, but I don't expect that'll happen. Well, I mean, to be fair, I suppose the most time-consuming thing other than at home has been Young Farmers for the last 15, 20 years. Bay was president of Somerset. I was president of Somerset. I've been president of my old club, which was North Somerset, based in Clevedon. She's been president of Weston and Bardwell. I was chair of staff management committee for 7 years. She is still field officer for the group, which is North Somerset, Chew Valley, Wedmore, and Weston and Bardwell. So she's heavily involved in that. And I'm just quietening down. I'm no longer chair of staff management, and theoretically I shall come off the committee this year. That will take quite a lot of pressure off. I love being at home. I mean, they always laugh at me. I love mowing my lawn. I have a ride-on lawnmower, and that is my quality management time. I love my music. I've got 4,000 songs on my iPhone, and they're all 60s, 70s, right up to modern day rock and stuff. I'm a bit of a closet rocker, and so I can do that without offending anybody. And you find during the summer, in particular, the winter is a little bit quieter, but I've got another slightly odd hobby as well. I collect model tractors. So yeah.
How big are they?
Well, the standard one's probably about 4 to 6 inches long. I got some slightly bigger ones, but I have got a ridiculously large quantity of them. Some are on display, and some are in boxes in the roof, and they're all catalogued, and I know what I've got.
Oh my word! You are a serious collector.
Well, it was a winter job. They were all just shoved up in the roof. We've got a huge attic, which is slightly dangerous, but there's another story. And I invested in some big plastic boxes, and as I put them into the box, so I wrote down where they were. So then if I take them off display, I can go and find the box, put it in the box, bring another one down.
Do you rotate them round?
Not as often as I ought to. It's quite hard work. Normally what happens is I go and buy a new one, and I think, I've got to put something away. What am I going to put away? I'm like, whoa.
How does your wife feel about it?
Well, we're lucky enough. You see, when we split the house, mother and father-in-law had a separate kitchen.
Yeah.
So when they died, we took the kitchen out, and we have got a proper office. So
that's the tractor room.
That is the tractor room, yeah. Yeah, it's. I would quite happily. There's one double cupboard which is full of recipe books and things, which I would quite happily get rid of and replace with another.
I think your wife might have something to say.
I think she does say it frequently. Yes, so it's a wish, but it's a completely no-go wish. It's never going to happen.
At least you've not got as bad as filling one of your industrial units with them.
No, I thought about it, but then decided I can't afford it, so that's fine.
That is a friend of mine. He runs storage containers, and I think about 5 of the storage containers are full of his junk.
Are they?
Really?
And you
Yes.
think that's not a good business model.
I never understand people that have got storage containers anyway, because I personally feel by the time you've paid all that money
Yeah.
for storage, you might just as well have sold it or given it away to somebody and then
Yeah.
go and buy yourself new.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's on my mind. So I want to ask the question. It's probably not the right time, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who supported your wife when, after you become well and then she struggled?
I did.
Yeah.
I think that's true to say. Because neither of us are very good at getting external support. We're very good at giving it to other people. She is a very good friend of both of ours, and her husband died very suddenly. We'd been there for supper on a Saturday night, had a stroke on Sunday, and died on Wednesday. And I and another friend have supported her throughout. It literally ran her business to start with, and still do quite a lot of that side of things. So, I mean, even then, it was, I don't know. So we're quite good at helping others, but we're not very good at asking for help, and therein lies the problem with a lot of us.
Yeah.
Very common. Very common.
But it's coming back to asking for help outside of that unit. I think the value of that can be. I mean, I have counselling every month. I cannot not have it. In particularly now because of my own personal circumstances. And I know that I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't have had that. It's I think it's vitally important. And I'm not saying it has to be a counsellor.
No, it doesn't. And I think I had it was again quite complicated. But at the beginning of lockdown, I lost my brother. He died very suddenly, and it is extraordinary. I think it brings things home to you. He died when we had a Thanksgiving service for him on the 29th of February, just before lockdown. And he was younger than me, and there were 350 people there.
Wow.
That was a Saturday. On the following Tuesday, my daughter-in-law's father died, and I was one of 10 at his funeral because the lockdown rules had come in. And that was quite a lot of support for quite a lot of people. I was helping with my sister-in-law, and we then had this enormous community during lockdown of the family. And it's quite interesting. I am opening up a little bit now, but I had, fear not, my wife knows about this, a girlfriend that I had long before I met Bay. I had a message to say that she had died in the August of the same year. Just a message. Hadn't seen her for 40 years.
Yeah.
That knocked me sideways, and I couldn't work that out at all. I couldn't work out why somebody that I hadn't seen 40 years, more than 40 years, knocked me sideways. And then suddenly, it was self-realization. But actually, I hadn't grieved for any of the other ones. And that just tipped the balance. But because I wasn't having to support anybody when she died, I could suddenly look at myself.
Yeah.
Whereas with the previous two, I was looking after lots of other people. And that was fine. I did that through music. And that was, came out the other end, all good.
But it is a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I think grief, you've just had a recent bereavement as well. And I think there's almost that bit where you forget that happens. And it's like, oh, bugger me. What happened? Oh, sorry. And then you think, oh dear, I haven't actually, why am I feeling like this about this when actually that happened that long ago? And it can be very confusing. Grief can be very confusing.
It can be. And if it's family grief, you can become so busy dealing with the practicalities of family grief that you don't actually have time to deal with the emotional side. Yeah. And that's, it is interesting. When my parents died, they were both in their 90s, and they'd had really good, long lives. We'd done lots of things together. And I didn't have great grief. I had thanks for a long and well-lived life. So therefore, when I did have emotional grief, it was probably the first time I'd had it, and I was in my mid-60s. And that's, we always get something new in our lives, don't we? And that was new for me.
Sent for a reason, isn't it? It absolutely is. But yeah, it's a tough time.
Yeah, it is. But you get through it, sometimes with help, sometimes, and as you say, you don't ever turn down the offer of help. And if you can't find it given, go and get it.
But also knowing where to go. And that's coming back to what you said at the very beginning, which is people just don't necessarily know that you can pick up the phone. We're doing a campaign in waiting for them to be printed.
We're doing a
men's mental health awareness.
Yeah.
And we're just in the process of doing something for this. And it's like people don't know which phone number to call or which website to go to. And so what we've done is we've pulled something together to be able to give to people, and we're going to target all men kind of environments, because actually, as we all know, like we've said, the suicide rate in Somerset is very, very high.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's it. Sometimes people, they don't like to ask people, where do I go when I'm feeling like this? Who do I ask? Because there's a level of shame that's attached to that. And when you've got that level of shame, your only option sometimes is to take your life.
Yeah. That's the only option you think you have.
Yeah, that's correct.
Farming Community Network have a stand at the Bath and West show, and we have it opposite the cattle rings, and I do a stint there for an hour or two. And I always we have little calling cards, and I hand them out, and people look slightly surprised, and I say, look, I hope you never need it, but if you know somebody who does, there's a telephone number that can help. I also accosted, it's quite funny, I accosted 2 paramedics who were walking past, and they had their heads down and they were looking absolutely straight front. And I said, morning, have you ever heard of the Farming Community Network? And they said, no. I kept on walking. I said, well, you jolly well ought to have. And that did stop them in their tracks. 10 minutes later, they knew a lot more than they did when they started. But there was a reluctance to think that they needed to know. And after we talked, they realised that actually it had the potential for paramedics in a rural sort of area. It could be quite useful.
Yeah.
And you don't always realise what might be useful to you at some point.
But that's the thing. It's about equipping yourself to do that, isn't it? I mean, I was at an inquest quite recently, and it was really harrowing when, the paramedics had believed that they'd left this person in the safe care of 3 adults, and they hadn't. And the consequences were disastrous. But, if they had been equipped and not going through necessarily statutory services, there are other services out there that you can pick up the phone to that people just don't understand. No. And you don't have to be a farmer to be the Farmers Network. It's about the countryside.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so.
It doesn't matter. I'm not a farmer. I have a farm and I have a holding number. I have all of that, but I don't need that evidence to pick up the phone and ask the Farming Network for some help. They will help whatever.
We're signposters as much as anything, so we will point people in the right direction.
Absolutely.
But I don't know. I don't think we ever put the phone down on anybody. In fact, I'm sure we never have. Doesn't matter who you are or where you came from.
Yeah.
It's about helping, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it's just opening your eyes and seeing that. But it's also, I think what's funny is, I mean, I live in a very small community where I am. And it's like, when did you last check on your neighbour? That's that bit, isn't it? They have a neighbourhood thing in our village, not in the village that I live in, but in the next village along. But nobody has ever knocked on my door, ever.
No,
nobody.
No.
I mean, the only people that have are people that know me, but they're not necessarily from that kind of support setup. They wait for you to go to them, and sometimes you think, actually, sometimes it would just be nice if people put their hand out there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, ours is a very linear village. And for the Queen's Golden Jubilee, a neighbour who we do know very well, and we said, okay, are we prepared to chuck £50 into the kitty each, and then we'll see if we can have a Golden Jubilee party in the garden? And we did, and we went round. We said, okay, well, we printed some invitations and we shoved them through every letterbox in the village. And I mean, it isn't a very big village, but I think we got about 25, 30 people there. Some we'd never clapped eyes on. and some we knew quite well didn't turn up and said they would and then didn't. You just don't know.
No.
And it was, in the end, it was completely free, because I can't remember how we did it now, but we funded it somehow or another. And it was a great afternoon. It was sort of tea party barbecue thing. But that, I don't think anything of that sort has happened in the village since. We did a young farmery one for the Platinum Jubilee, so that was slightly different. We had a beacon.
And lots of people attended, I'm sure.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
It's really, we have nothing going on in this in the hamlet that I live in.
No,
Absolutely nothing.
something probably more happens in the village up the road.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah.
But you're out of it, and I think that's where recognising people that live even in living in Weston-super-Mare and living in Bridgewater, people are still very isolated from their communities, and it doesn't matter.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying at the start about people don't know how to get involved in their community a lot.
Well, how many times do you hear it on the news and on television and whatever that the loneliest place in the world could be the centre of a city?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my kids think I'm nutters because when I go to London, I say hello to everybody the same as I do here.
Morning.
If I walk past somebody, I say good morning to them or good afternoon, and they go, "Oh, Mum, they're going to think you're crazy." And I said, "I don't care. I'm not interested in what they think."
No, absolutely.
I might be the only person that speaks to them in the whole day, and I think that's what's important.
Yeah. Well, they might go home and say, "Do you know what? Some weird woman said good morning to me." And that sparked another conversation, didn't it?
Exactly.
And that's what's really good.
Yeah.
I'm really conscious of time because I know you've got to go and cut grass and hay and things.
I've got to turn it.
Oh, turn it. Sorry.
Yeah. I turned it yesterday. It needs turning again. So you've got the bit that's facing the sun now. I turn over so that the bottom bit faces the sun.
I got you.
In fact, when this is all over, I'll show you a reel that I did yesterday on my phone.
Oh, sounds good.
That will explain it all.
Well, thank you so much for coming. It's been great having you and chatting, and yeah, we'd love to have you back because I'm sure there's more stories you can tell us.
I suspect there might be.
Thanks very much, John.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.